Hey guys, today's lesson I just want you to be practicing more and more of these critical activity questions. So I've provided a booklet here for you, and there's a bunch of past HSC style questions. Some have been in exams, some are just what you'd expect, and then the full work solutions. But what I thought I would do is talk through a few of the questions with you. So this video is me going through the solutions I'm going to go through question 2 to start with, okay? But otherwise give the booklet a go first if you like, and then you can use this for help. But let's jump straight into question 2. Okay, so we've got Murray's building a new garage, and here's all the activities from A to L. So the network shows the activities as completion time in days. Which two activities immediately precede G? So we find G, and then it's the two activities that immediately precede it. So pre being beforehand. So we can see here, we've got a dummy activity actually there because it's dotted, which means that they just wanted D to join up here, but they couldn't get it to join, so that's what the dummy activity is for. So the two activities, well, we can see the first one's C, but the second one is actually D, okay? Not D is in the dummy activity, but D is in this activity here that was linked up with the dummy activity. Okay, so now complete the diagram. So they've put the boxes there for you, and then we want to find the minimum completion time. Remember, the minimum completion time is, well, technically we usually have our double box at the end, but it is the answer here that they're looking for. So I'm going to jump straight in and do my EST and LSTs. Okay, so I've gone through, completed my ESTs, adding them all up, and we get the minimum completion time is 30 days. Okay, because that's the answer as our EST for the final box. Hence, what is the float time for activity E? So now we go, okay, float time, activity E. Well, now I want to go through and do my LSTs, okay? All right, so be careful. Some of these got me a few times because I went along the arrow in the wrong direction. So when you're going backwards, you want to only be going back along the lines back against an arrow, okay? So, but I've only done the ones around E because that's the one I need to find the float time for. So now let's think about our float time. Remember our float time? So the earliest time you can start activity E is 8 days in. It takes 2 days to complete, which gives me 10. But then the latest time I have to start the next activity is 16, which means 16 minus 10 gives me 6 hours of float time. Oh, well, not hours, days. All right, well, not too bad for a past HSC question. These are generally found towards the back of the exam, and that was worth 4 marks. Okay, the next one I'd like to go through is question 5, okay? So this one was in 2019's exam, and the state average was pretty awful of 30%, so quite low. So let's have a look at this together. We want to draw a network based on the activity table, okay? So you guys were pretty good at this in class. What we need to remember is the ones that have the dash, they come from the start. And the ones that are not immediate predecessors or prerequisites, they're calling it this time, they link to the finish. So again, use pencil. So I can see the only one that links to the start is activity A. All right, and if I go through my immediate prerequisites, I got A, B, C, D, E. So the only one that's not linking to that is F. So F is the only activity that links to the end. All right, let's have a look now. Do we have any shared immediate predecessors? No, so this one shouldn't be too hard, hopefully pretty straightforward because there's no repetitive, other than B and C need to both come from A. So if I do that like this, and then we've got D has to come from B, but then C and D need to be immediate predecessors for F. So if I link D down here, now I can come straight out from C and D and join to F for activity E. Now I could have also, well actually no, that's exactly how I would have drawn it. Okay, so now we've done that. That was worth 3 marks. Make sure all your activities have arrows. Make sure you've labelled the duration and you've got start and finish. Oh, actually, no, we're not finished yet. Determine the minimum time for the project to be completed. So now we go through, do our EST, our LSTs, and the minimum time for the project to be completed, remember, is the EST of the final box. So go ahead and give that a go. So you should have a box on every vertex, starting at 0 and adding along. So 0 plus 2, 2 plus 6, 8 plus 2 gives me 10, but there's 2 coming in here, so I'm just going to write it. 2 plus 5 gives me 7. Remember, I take the biggest number on my way. So then 10 plus 1 gives me 11. 11 plus 1 gives me 12. Now working backwards, I'm taking the smallest numbers. 12 minus 1, 11 minus 1, 10 minus 2, 8 minus 6, well, I've got 2 coming in here, so I'm going to write as an option 2. 10 minus 5 gives me 5. Take the smallest number. 2 minus 0, 2 gives me 0. All right, I didn't even have to do the LST at this point because it just wanted what the minimum completion time is. So the minimum completion time is 12, and this was, are these hours? Yes, 12 hours. Okay, all right. Now, determine the float time on non-critical activities. So let's go through and do our float times. So we got, okay, 0 plus 2 gives me 2, which is our latest start time, so it has a float time of 0. There's no time to delay if we wanted to. Now we've got 2 plus 6 gives me 8, which is the latest start time of the next one, so that it gives me a float time of 0. 8 plus 2 gives me 10, that is the latest start time of the next activity, so again a float time of 0. But activity C, this one probably does have a float time. 2 is the earliest start time, takes 5 hours to complete, that's 7, but the latest start time is 10, which gives me a float time of 3 hours. And 10 plus 1 gives me 11, which is that number, and same thing there. So the only activity that was not on the critical path, because if I needed to identify my critical path, I can just see that now, following along all the zeros. The only activity that's not on that critical path is activity C. So therefore, I just have to give them the float time of activity C, because they said any activity that's not a critical activity, which is 5 hours. Okay. Let's have a look at one more together. So this is question 6. I purposely chose this one because it's just becoming familiar with another way you can fill in a network, okay? So sometimes the question might push you towards displaying it in a certain way. And you can see here, instead of doing the vertices as a dot and the box next to it like we do, they do the vertices as the box, but which is an oval. So it's just becoming familiar with new ways of looking at questions. All right, Bianca's designing a project, producing an advertising brochure. It involves activities A to M, and the completion time is in hours. What's the earliest starting time for activity J? The earliest starting time, okay, here's activity J. So what I need to find is this value here. All right, so if I go through and add them up, so if I just start with the ones that look like they're going to have something to do with J. So I've got, well, we're going to have 0 at the start, plus 3, plus 2. Now you can see here what's going to happen. 3 plus 5 gives me 8. 2 plus 9 gives me 11. What do? We take the biggest number. So the earliest start time is 11 hours for J. Latest start time for activity H. So at this point, yeah, I could just go through and just pick the certain areas of the network that relates to the question. But if you skim down, you're going to need to find the minimum completion and the float times. So if I need to find the minimum completion time, I need to find the ESTs of everything. Okay, so I might as well go through, do the whole lot, EST and LSTs. So let's see. This will give me 4 plus 5 gives me 9. 3 plus 7 gives me 10. Take the biggest number. Then I have 10 plus 2 gives me 12. 10 plus 5, 15. There's 2 coming in here, so I write it as an option. 11 plus 6 gives me 17. Bigger number. 17 plus 7 gives me 24. And 12 plus 14 gives me 16. Again, taking the bigger number. And so then our finish, which they haven't got on there, so I add it. 24 plus 10 gives me 34. Now the question itself that we're up to, we want the LST of activity H. So that is that number right there. So now if I work backwards, so I go 34 minus 10, 24, the LST for H will be the latest start time for activity H. That'll be the latest start time for activity K. The latest start time for activity H will be this one, okay, because it's the latest time you can then begin activity H. Okay, keep going back. This time we take the smallest number, don't forget, so I should have 20, and then 20 minus 2 will give me 18 for H. Okay, now it's 18, so technically if we were doing all the LSTs, I'd write 18 as an option and I'd come back through and I'd have a look at the other alternative way. 24 minus 7, okay, well that gives me 17, and then 17 minus 5, that gives me 12. So what we would normally do if we were filling all of these out, we would put 12 in here, which makes sense because it's the smallest number. But when they only want the latest start time for activity H alone, they're not talking about the entire network. We want to know just H. So if you were here at 20 and you had to come back along H, you minus 2, it gives you 18. So that's what you have to be careful of. If they want an individual activities time, you're just looking at the number on that, not the overall smallest number. I hope that makes sense. Okay, now we want the float time for activity I. I can't even see. Oh, there it is. Okay, activity I. So we've got all the information around it that we need. So what do? We say, okay, the earliest start time for activity I is 12 hours in. It takes 5 hours to complete, which gives me 17. The latest time you can start the next activity is 17 hours. So its float time is 0. So in other words, there is no time to delay the project. Oops, sorry, I just realized I took the wrong number, didn't I? The green highlight didn't help me when I was using green pen. Remember, we take the earliest start time for the activity 4, that's 10. We add the 5, the duration of it, that's 15. But the next activity doesn't have to be started until 17, which gives me a float time of 2 hours. That was my mistake. Okay, so following our formulas again, it's the EST plus the activity duration, and then the difference between that and the LST of the next activity. All right. So then the minimum time to produce the brochure, we already worked that out, is 34 hours. Okay, it's always the number, our EST of the last box, or you could find it by, if you did all the float times of every activity, adding up all the times along the critical path will also give you 34. But notice how I didn't, you can just go through and do the whole LST and ESTs for the whole activities if you want. But in that particular question, especially if I was running short in time in exam, I'm just focusing on the areas that they've asked me about, okay? So I noticed there was no LSTs that I calculated for the last ones because it was irrelevant for me to do. It was wasting my time. But if you have the time, you can definitely go through and just do the whole lot. Okay, so there's 3 different questions from past HSC style questions. So what I want you to do now is to go through the rest of these and give them a go. If you're not sure on any, just email me or post in Teams and I can do a video tutorial just like I did on those other ones. Good luck.